This is a story of a young woman who left her home to explore the world, full of dreams, excitement, and trust in the people she would meet along the way. But her journey would end in a way no one could have imagined, a case that shocked an entire country and revealed how quickly a moment of trust can turn into tragedy. And in this story, you will see how a simple meeting turned into a nightmare that would never be forgotten. It was the evening of December 1st, 2018, in Auckland, New Zealand, a vibrant city filled with lights, music, and people enjoying the weekend. The streets were alive, restaurants were busy, and tourists were everywhere, soaking in the atmosphere, and among them was a 22-year-old British traveler named Grace Millane, who was celebrating her birthday while exploring a new country, documenting her journey, sharing moments, and living the kind of adventure many people dream of. That night, Grace had plans. She had connected with someone online, a man she had recently met, and like many modern connections, it started with casual conversation, simple messages, and a decision to meet in person, something that seemed completely normal, something people do every day without a second thought. They met in the city center, walking through busy streets, blending in with the crowd. Nothing about the situation seemed unusual. Nothing felt dangerous. And from the outside, it looked like just another date, just two people getting to know each other. As the night went on, they visited bars, shared drinks, talked, laughed, and continued getting to know each other. And at some point, they made a decision to go back to his apartment, a choice that felt ordinary, a continuation of what seemed like a normal evening. But inside that apartment, everything changed. What happened next would later be pieced together through evidence, timelines, and investigation. But in that moment, there were no witnesses, no one to hear what was happening, no one to step in. The man she trusted, the man she chose to spend her evening with, would become the person who ended her life. As the night turned into early morning, the vibrant city outside continued its rhythm, completely unaware that inside one room, a life had been taken. The following day, December 2nd, Grace didn't respond to messages. She didn't check in. She didn't continue her travel updates. And for someone who had been so active, so connected, this silence was unusual. Back home, her family began to worry. Messages went unanswered. Calls went unnoticed. And the distance between them suddenly felt heavier than ever. Days passed, and concern turned into fear. Authorities were contacted, and what began as a missing person case quickly gained attention, especially as it became clear that Grace had last been seen in Auckland. Investigators started retracing her steps, looking at CCTV footage, tracking her movements through the city, and slowly building a timeline of her final hours. They saw her walking through the city, entering buildings, moving through crowds, and eventually they saw her with a man she had met. The footage showed them together, appearing normal, casual, nothing that immediately raised alarm. But as the timeline continued, one detail stood out. She was never seen leaving his apartment. As investigators focused on him, his behavior became increasingly suspicious. Instead of reporting her missing, instead of showing concern, he continued with his life as if nothing had happened. He went shopping, made purchases, even went on another date, actions that seemed disturbingly normal for someone who had been one of the last people to see her alive. Police questioned him, and at first, he denied everything, claiming that Grace had left his apartment, that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But the evidence told a different story. Surveillance footage showed him entering and leaving locations with items that raised questions, including a large suitcase, something that would soon become central to the case. Investigators dug deeper, analyzing his movements, his phone data, his purchases, and slowly the truth began to surface. The case took a dark turn when police discovered evidence that pointed not just to disappearance, but to something far more serious. Search teams were deployed, focusing on areas connected to the suspect's movements, including remote locations outside the city. Days later, in a forested area, the worst fears were confirmed. Grace Millane's body was found. The news sent shockwaves through New Zealand and beyond. A young traveler, full of life and hope, gone in a place she had only just begun to explore. As the investigation continued, the details became even more disturbing. The man responsible had attempted to cover his tracks, using calculated steps, making purchases, transporting evidence, trying to erase what had happened. But the digital world, the cameras, the records, they told a story he couldn't hide from. During the trial, the truth unfolded in front of the world. The defense tried to argue that her death was accidental, the result of consensual activity gone wrong. But the evidence, the patterns, the actions after her death all pointed towards something far more deliberate. The jury listened, examined every detail, every timeline, every piece of evidence, and in the end, they reached a verdict. Guilty. The man was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. But for Grace's family, no sentence could bring her back. Her story became more than just a case. It became a warning, a reminder of vulnerability, of trust, and of the hidden dangers that can exist even in the most ordinary situations. People around the world followed the case, not just because of its tragic ending, but because it felt so real, so close to everyday life. A simple meeting, a normal night out, a decision that millions of people make every day. And yet, in this case, it led to something unthinkable. Grace Millane's journey was meant to be one of discovery, of adventure, of celebrating life. Instead, it became a story that would never be forgotten, a story that continues to echo as a reminder that sometimes the biggest dangers are the ones we never see coming. And that is what makes this case so haunting, because it didn't begin with fear. It began with trust, and that trust cost her everything.